Welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
You know, today we're going to do things a little differently. We're going on a bit of a time travel adventure.
Oh, a time machine.
Yeah, kind of. We're going back to 2010. Remember 2010?
Yes, 2010.
Skinny jeans were everywhere. The iPad was like just becoming a thing.
Yeah, the first iPad.
And Amazon, well, they were already dropping some serious hints about the massive tech revolution they were about to unleash.
I like that unleash.
Yeah. So to get a glimpse of what they were thinking, we're cracking open Jeff Bezos' 2010 letter to shareholders.
Ooh, interesting. But here's the twist. We're not just looking back.
Right.
We're using some insightful commentary to understand how this letter basically predicted our present.
Okay, so we've got the actual letter and some expert analysis to help us understand why this piece of writing is still so relevant in 2025.
Right. What's so fascinating is that Amazon was already a huge player in 2010, but this letter isn't about bragging about their success. Bezos uses it to lay out a vision, a roadmap for building what he calls an enduring franchise. And let me tell you, a lot of what he discussed has become the foundation of our digital world today.
So it's not just a historical document.
No.
It's like a sneak peek into the mind of a tech visionary who saw the future.
Oh, exactly.
Before we get too deep into the letter, let's just set the stage for what Amazon was doing back in 2010. They had this huge e-commerce business already.
Yeah, they were dominating book sales.
Right, exactly. They were like the go-to place for books and increasingly for other stuff too. And they were already starting to make waves with things like the Kindle.
Yeah, the Kindle was pretty revolutionary at the time.
Right, but it wasn't just about selling products. They were already laying the groundwork for AWS, even though most people didn't really know what cloud computing was back then.
Yeah, they were way ahead of the curve.
Exactly. So there's this sense in the letter that Bezos is not just describing what Amazon is doing, but he's explaining how they think about the world, how they think about technology.
I see it as a philosophy.
Yeah, like a framework for building something that will last.
An enduring franchise.
Exactly. And what's really wild is how much of what he predicted has actually come true. It was like he had a crystal ball or something.
It's pretty remarkable.
So let's dive into some of the big ideas from the letter. For starters, Bezos talks about data sharding, eventual consistency, these really complex tech concepts. It's like they were already building the cloud even before AWS was a household name.
Right. He was laying the groundwork for some major innovations, and there's this quote where he compares Amazon's advanced tech to magic.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
I want to unpack what he meant by that, because it's more than just a clever turn of phrase.
Okay, so magic data sharding, and of course, customer obsession. You always hear about Amazon's customer focus, but Bezos takes it to another level in this letter.
Absolutely. He even includes a quote from his 1997 letter to shareholders, which really sums it up. It says, "When forced to choose between optimizing the appearance of our GAAP accounting and maximizing the present value of future cash flows, we'll take the cash flows."
Wow, that's pretty radical when you think about it.
It is.
It's like they were willing to delay gratification for a bigger payoff down the road.
Exactly. Most companies are obsessed with short-term profits, trying to impress Wall Street every quarter. But Amazon was willing to prioritize long-term value for customers, even if it meant their balance sheet didn't look as good in the short term.
So while other companies were focused on quarterly earnings reports, Amazon was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. What's really interesting is what they were investing in back then, Prime Kindle, and quietly building out AWS.
None of these were huge moneymakers yet.
Right, but they were laying the foundation for something much bigger. Does this long-term thinking resonate with you?
Yeah.
How often do you see companies sacrificing short-term gains for a bigger vision? Feels pretty rare, right?
It is, and that takes us to the next big theme, technology. Bezos dives headfirst into some serious computer science jargon right from the start. It's like he wanted to signal that Amazon was playing a different game altogether.
Yeah, he throws around terms like service-oriented architecture, or SOA, where they were breaking down their platform into hundreds of interconnected services. Can you break this down for us? What's the big deal with SOA?
Imagine building a house back then. Most companies were building software like a giant single-structure house. If one part needed fixing, the whole thing could be affected. Amazon's approach was different. With SOA, they were building in a modular way, like assembling a house from prefabricated units.
So instead of one giant unwieldy structure, they had lots of smaller pieces that could work together.
Precisely, each function was a separate service that could communicate with others. This was a game changer for flexibility, and scalability. Teams could work on different services independently without the risk of breaking the whole system.
Yeah.
It also meant they could scale up specific services as needed without having to rebuild everything.
So it's like building with Legos instead of trying to carve a statue out of a single block of marble.
That's a great analogy. And what's really mind-blowing is that this approach was way ahead of its time. It heavily influenced the rise of microservices today, which is basically SOA taken to the next level.
So Amazon was laying the groundwork for the cloud-based world we live in today,
Yeah.
even before most people understood what that even meant. And they were doing it all while keeping the customer front and center. It's like they were secretly building a spaceship while everyone else was still figuring out how to ride a bicycle.
That's a great way to put it, but let's not forget about the fuel for that spaceship data. Tons and tons of data.
Yeah, we'll get into that in just a bit, but first a quick word from our sponsors.
Stay with us.
We'll be right back. After the break. We were talking about all that data Amazon was swimming in back in 2010, right? Petabytes of information, just mind-boggling. And they were developing some super sophisticated ways to manage it all. One of the things Bezos talks about in the letter is eventual consistency.
Eventual consistency.
Yeah, can you explain what that is and why it mattered? To be honest, I'm not sure I fully grasped the concept. It sounds a bit like organized chaos.
Well, it is a bit of a trade-off, but a really smart one. Think about it like how a group of friends makes plans for a party.
Okay.
Not everyone needs to know every single detail instantly, but eventually everyone gets the info they need to show up at the right time and place.
I'm starting to see the analogy. So instead of insisting that every single piece of information be updated across the entire system simultaneously, they allowed for a little bit of lag time.
Exactly. In a traditional database, every update has to be reflected everywhere instantly. But in a massive system like Amazon's, that can be really slow and inefficient. So they opted for a system where updates might take a little time to propagate, but it allows for much better performance and availability overall.
So it's like accepting a tiny delay in exchange for a much smoother and more robust experience in the long run.
Precisely. And this is where that data sharding concept comes in.
Right, we talked about that earlier.
Instead of storing all the data in one giant database, they split it up and distribute it across multiple servers. This makes the system more resilient because if one server goes down, the others can keep things running.
So it's like taking a massive library and dividing it into specialized sections. It's much easier to find what you're looking for when things are organized and distributed in a smart way.
That's a great way to think about it. And this distributed approach allowed for incredible scalability and reliability. It was also a key factor in the development of Amazon Web Services, or AWS.
It's amazing how these seemingly technical details have had such a huge impact on how we live and work today. They were solving problems that most people didn't even know existed yet.
And they were doing it with a focus on the customer experience. Remember WhisperSync for Kindle? That was a prime example of how Amazon was using these complex data management techniques to make life better for their customers.
Oh yeah, WhisperSync. I love that feature. It lets you seamlessly switch between reading on your Kindle and other devices, and everything stays in sync. Your furthest page, bookmarks, notes, even highlights. It feels like magic.
Bezos actually uses the word magic to describe it in the letter, and it really does feel that way from a user's perspective, but behind the scenes, it's a massive data synchronization challenge. They were essentially solving cloud-scale problems before most people even knew those problems existed.
So it's like they were hiding a supercomputer under the hood of a sleek, user-friendly e-reader. You'd never know all the complex data juggling that was happening in the background just to make sure your reading experience was seamless.
And that's the genius of Amazon. They're obsessed with the technical details, but they never lose sight of the customer. They understand the technology should be invisible, it should just work, and it should make people's lives easier.
It's a powerful reminder that innovation isn't just about inventing cool new gadgets. It's about solving real-world problems in a way that benefits people.
Absolutely. And those solutions often involve a combination of technical brilliance and a deep understanding of human needs. That's what we see with WhisperSync, and it's a theme that runs throughout this 2010 letter.
So WhisperSync wasn't just a cool feature for Kindle users. It was a testing ground for the technologies that would become the backbone of AWS. It's incredible how something that seems so simple on the surface can have such profound implications behind the scenes.
And it's a testament to Amazon's long-term vision. They were willing to invest in something that might have seemed frivolous at the time, a magic feature for an e-reader, but it ended up having a massive impact down the road.
Speaking of long-term vision, Bezos talks a lot about day one thinking in the letter. Can you remind us what that means and how it relates to everything we've been discussing?
Day one is all about maintaining that startup spirit, even when you're a massive company. It's about being obsessed with customers, constantly innovating, taking risks, and never ever getting complacent. It's the opposite of resting on your laurels.
It's like saying we may be a big company, but we're still going to act like a hungry underdog with something to prove. I love that mentality.
And you can see it in everything they do. They're always experimenting, always pushing boundaries, always trying to figure out what's next.
So how does this day one philosophy connect to their approach to technology and data?
Well, think about their willingness to embrace new technologies like SOA and eventual consistency. These were radical ideas at the time, and they required a willingness to challenge conventional wisdom and take risks. That's very much a day one mindset.
They weren't afraid to go against the grain, even if it meant making some mistakes along the way.
Exactly. They understood that innovation is messy and you can't be afraid to fail, but they also had a clear vision for where they wanted to go, and they were relentless in their pursuit of that vision.
And that vision was all about using technology to create a better future for their customers.
Absolutely. They saw the potential of technology to empower people to make their lives easier, more convenient, and more fulfilling, and they weren't afraid to invest in that future, even if it meant taking some risks and making some bold bets.
That's a powerful message. It's a reminder that we all have the power to shape the future through our choices and our actions. It's about having the courage to dream big, to embrace new ideas, and to never stop learning and growing.
It's about having that day one mindset, whether you're running a company, building a product, or just trying to make a difference in your own little corner of the world.
Well said, but before we get too philosophical, there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to explore. Bezos talks a lot about machine learning in the 2010 letter. Even back then, they were using algorithms to personalize the customer experience and make their systems smarter. This was long before AI became the buzzword it is today. Can you tell us more about what they were doing and why it mattered?
They were already using machine learning in a lot of different ways. For example, their search engine was using data mining and algorithms to build topic models and identify product attributes. This made their search results more relevant and helpful for customers.
So they were using AI to understand what customers were looking for, even if they couldn't articulate it perfectly themselves.
Exactly. They are analyzing vast amounts of data, past purchases, browsing history, product reviews, to predict what each individual customer might be interested in. It was like having a personal shopper who knows you better than you know yourself.
I can see how that would be incredibly valuable for both Amazon and their customers. But I imagine there were some challenges involved in implementing machine learning at such a large scale.
Oh, absolutely. Machine learning was still a relatively new field in 2010, and there were a lot of technical hurdles to overcome, but Amazon was willing to invest in the research and development needed to make it work.
And that investment has clearly paid off. Machine learning is now woven into the fabric of almost everything Amazon does, from product recommendations to Alexa's voice recognition. It's mind-blowing to think how far they've come since those early experiments back in 2010. It's like they had a glimpse into the future, and they were determined to make it a reality.
It's a testament to their vision and their willingness to embrace new technologies. They weren't afraid to invest in something that was still relatively unproven at the time, and that gamble's paid off in spades.
It's a powerful lesson for any business, really. It's easy to get caught up in the short-term pressures, but the real breakthroughs come when you're willing to play the long game and invest in the future.
And that requires a certain mindset. It's about having a clear vision for the future and being unwavering in your commitment to it, even when faced with challenges or setbacks. It's about believing in your ideas even when others don't. And it's about being willing to adapt and evolve along the way because the future is never certain. And the only way to stay ahead is to keep learning, keep experimenting, and keep pushing the boundaries.
It's that day one spirit, again, that relentless pursuit of something better. And it's something we can all cultivate, whether we're leading a company, building a product, or just trying to make a difference in our own little corner of the world.
Absolutely, because the future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we create through our choices, our actions, and our unwavering belief in what's possible.
And speaking of creating the future, there's one more aspect of Bezos' 2010 letter that I want to touch on, his approach to long-term investments. He talks about making bold rather than timid investment decisions when they see a sufficient probability of gaining market leadership advantages. Can you elaborate on what he meant by that and how it played out for Amazon?
Yeah, he was talking about really going for it, not just dipping their toes in the water.
So not afraid to make a splash.
Exactly. They weren't looking for safe bets. They were looking for game changers.
And they had the resources to back it up, which probably gave them a lot of confidence.
Right. They were already a huge company, but they weren't content to just sit back and count their money. They wanted to build something that would last.
That enduring franchise idea.
Exactly. And that takes guts. Not every company is willing to take those kinds of risks.
Especially when you consider the scale of their investments. We're talking about billions of dollars poured into things like AWS and Kindle.
And those were not sure things back then. A lot of people thought they were crazy.
Yeah, like who needs a dedicated e-reader when you could just read on your phone or your laptop?
Right, but Bezos saw something that others didn't pair. He understood the power of focus and specialization.
And he was willing to bet on it big time.
And that bet paid off. The Kindle revolutionized the way we read, and AWS became the backbone of the internet.
It's amazing to think that those early investments shaped the world we live in today.
It's a testament to their vision and their willingness to play the long game.
And it all goes back to that day one mentality we talked about earlier, that constant drive to innovate, to experiment, to never settle for the status quo.
It's about embracing uncertainty and being willing to learn from your mistakes.
Because let's be honest, not every Amazon experiment has been a home run.
Right, they've had their share of flops, but they never let those setbacks stop them from trying new things.
And I think that's a really important lesson for anyone who wants to be successful. You can't be afraid to fail.
Failure is just part of the process. It's how you learn and grow.
And Amazon has definitely shown that they're willing to learn and adapt.
They're constantly iterating on their products and services, always looking for ways to improve.
And they're not afraid to make big changes when necessary.
Like when they decided to completely revamp their website back in the early 2000s.
That was a huge risk, but it paid off.
It made their website more user-friendly, and it helped them scale their business even faster.
So it seems like Amazon's success is not just about being bold, it's also about being smart and strategic.
Right. They're not just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. They have a clear vision for where they want to go, and they're making calculated decisions to get there.
And they're always keeping the customer in mind.
That's the key takeaway from all of this. I think Amazon's success is ultimately about their relentless focus on the customer.
It's about understanding what people need and want, and then figuring out how to deliver it better than anyone else.
And that's something we can all learn from, whether we're running a business, building a product, or just trying to be better at our jobs.
It's about putting the customer at the center of everything you do.
And never forgetting that the customer is the ultimate judge of your success.
Well said. I think that's a great note to end on. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Amazon's 2010 vision, what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this conversation?
I hope they'll be inspired by Amazon's story. It's a story about innovation, about taking risks, about believing in your ideas, and about never giving up on your dreams.
And it's a story that's still being written today. So keep an eye on Amazon because they're not done yet.
They're just getting started.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Amazon's 2010 vision. We'll be back soon with another fascinating look at the world of tech and innovation.
Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries.
And never forget, it's always day one.